Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into our latest general election tracker video. So I'm a little bit behind with this. I should have done one of these in November. The last one that we did was in October, looking at September's opinion poll data. I've had a very busy few weeks, as always at this time of year, with the day job, which is Weather Channel, of course. So doing winter updates and things like that. So I am, I missed November's tracker video, but here we are in December, and I will bring you up to date with all of the opinion polls, since October right the way through to the very latest opinion polls as we go into the early part of December. So we're going to have quite a bit to get through, quite a bit of data to look at. We'll start off with the latest prediction for the coming general election from Electoral Calculus. That's where we'll begin, and then we'll have a look at the data in terms of opinion polls, in terms of voting intention, in terms of approval for Boris Johnson, and also for Keir Starmer. We'll see how the government overall is doing. And I shall get to all that for you in a moment. Just say that if you're enjoying these videos, which I don't, I want to do them once a month, but occasionally I may be very busy and may not be able to do one every single month. But if you are enjoying these videos, then please like, share, subscribe on videos, and drop a comment. Let us know what you think about this video and what you think is going on, in terms of the political scene at the moment. It's quite an interesting time, isn't it? Right then, so the last video that we did in October, based on September's opinion polls, the prediction from Electoral Calculus was a Conservative majority of 20 at the next general election. Let's see how that has changed then in the past month, and here it is. So Electoral Calculus is now predicting that the Conservatives will be short of a majority. So a hung parliament is now favoured rather than a Conservative majority, and the Conservatives will be short of a overall majority by 35 seats, which is a very significant amount to be short by. We'll probably see Labour being able to, do some sort of deal with maybe the Scottish Nationalists and Liberal Democrats and whatnot, and be able to form a government actually with that, despite the fact the Conservatives have a higher number of seats. But anyway, let's go through the prediction and see what's happening. So I'm going to turn off webcam for this. Obviously, there has been a very considerable swing away from the Conservatives and towards Labour, over the past couple of months, because, again, the prediction from September's opinion polls in October was for a Conservative majority of 20. Now we see Conservative short 35. So there's obviously been quite significant developments. We will talk about those polls in a moment. Remember, these predictions are based on opinion polls, and this prediction actually is based on November's opinion polls. But we will go for October's opinion polls as well, as we didn't get to see those. Right, so let's see then what's going on. So the central prediction, so we got our parties here: Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Reform, Green, SNP, Plaid, Others, DUP, Sinn Féin, SDLP and Alliance. In that column, the 2019 vote shares are just there, and the seats won 2019 just there. And then this is the predicted part of the table. So we see that the central prediction for the Conservatives now in the next general election is to have 291 seats, which is 35 short of where they need to be to get an overall majority. I think they need to get to 326. So they're a long way short. They're under 300 seats on the central prediction. There is a range of error with that, of course. So at their lowest point, they could get 204 seats, which of course would see Labour in a big majority. Conversely, they might still get a majority based on the margin of error, and at the upper end of the range, they could get as high as 375 seats. That would be very unlikely, of course, given that the central prediction is them to be on 291 seats. The big change is what's happened with their predicted vote share. So they are now down to 37%, 37.3%. When we looked at this, when we did this, like in October, based on September's opinion polls, they were still hovering around 40%, I think. So they have lost quite a lot off their vote share over the past couple of months. So they've virtually reached parity, actually, with Labour in terms of the vote share. So now Labour is on a predicted vote share of 37.2. So 37.2 for Labour, 37.3 for the Conservatives. Big increase in the Labour vote share, therefore, and a big decrease in the Conservative vote share. That gives a central prediction for Labour of 269 seats. So although Conservative and Labour are both, at 37%, basically neck and neck, Conservatives still get a few more seats compared to Labour on the universal swing. Anyway, of course, that doesn't indicate or does take into account what might happen locally if there's tactical voting, for example, between Labour and the Liberal Democrats and whatnot in individual seats. So the Labour seat score could be a little bit higher than that. Again, margin of error for Labour, so 192 seats at their low end and 352 seats well into a majority, at the high end for Labour now. So, very significant developments. That compares to 2019 when the Conservatives got 44.7% of the vote with 365 seats out of the biggest Conservative vote share since the 1970 general election, and Labour got 33% of the vote, but with only 203 seats, which was their worst showing in terms of seats, not share, but in terms of seats, their worst showing in 2019 since 1935, I think. To see how all of the other parties are doing before we move on from this. So the Liberal Democrats are on a predicted vote share of 9%, which gives them 11 seats, a range from 5 to 31. So a big range here for the Liberal Democrats. Again, that probably takes into account some tactical voting going on. For Reform, we see they are on a predicted vote share of 2%, and predicted not to get any seats. Of the high end, they might get 2. The Greens are on a predicted vote share of nearly 6%, but only get 1 seat. Again, that's down to first past the post. Their high end might get them to 2 seats. Their low end, they keep their 1 seat. The SNP, predicted vote share of 56 seats. And at the high end, they could again, get 56 seats, and at their low end, they're down to 38 seats. That's on a predicted vote share of 4.2%, barely changed from 2019. And then in terms of the others, Plaid predicted to get 4 seats, and DUP 8 seats, Sinn Féin 7 seats. They don't take their seats, of course. SDLP 2 and Alliance 1. So let's have a look at those polls then. So this is just to show what happened in October, as I didn't get to do a video in November. So in October, October's opinion polls basically had the Conservatives in the lead from beginning to end. So if I'd done a video in October, actually, I think the projection would have been still for a Conservative majority, probably somewhere between around 10 and 20 seats. So the big development has actually happened in November. More about that in a moment. But through October, generally the Conservatives were leading the opinion polls until right at the very end of the month, where we get this poll turning up with Ipsos MORI, which gives Labour a 1% lead, 35 to 36, 35 Conservatives, 36% Labour. But other than that, sort of that straddles October into November anyway. Other than that, all of the other opinion polls during October have the Conservatives in the lead. Sometimes it's very low, so for example, Savanta Conres, only a 2% Conservative lead. Sometimes it's quite sizable, so for example, YouGov for the Times, that gives the Conservatives a 10% lead, 41 to 31%. But, solid blue in October. So the changes obviously happened in November, so let's have a look at November's opinion polls then, and going into December as well. But remember, the prediction from Electoral Calculus is just based on November's opinion polls, and there we see it. We see the change there, don't we? So the beginning of November, we continue with those Conservative leads in the blue up to there. So that's repeal Wilton strategies on the 10th of November, and that has Labour ahead by 2%. So just here is where all of the Conservative lead polls are. It is a narrow lead even then, so just like 1, 2, 3%. But Conservatives in the lead through the first week of November with these polls. But then clearly the Conservative lead has narrowed in early November compared to in October. So there's a narrowing of the Conservative lead that takes place probably at the end of October. and continues into early November, and then sort of a crossover takes place from around the 10th of November onwards, seemingly, and we start seeing the Conservatives and Labour beginning to trade blows. But Labour, we see some red appearing. So the first poll that has Labour in the lead is this one, Repeal Wilton Strategies from the 10th of November, gives Labour a 2% lead, Conservatives on 36%, Labour on 38%. We have a Savanta Comrades poll, this is just here, 11th to 12th of November, that gets Labour to 40%, which is somewhere they haven't been for a long time, I think, actually, and gives them a 6% lead, 40% to 40% Labour, 34% Conservatives. But after a few Conservative leads that are coming through, for example, Cantor here has the Conservatives on 39 and Labour on 36, a 3% Conservative lead. But as we go further up, we do see red continue to appear. So some of the polls continue to have Labour a little bit ahead. Survation, for example, gives Labour a 3% lead just there. And as we go into December, we still see Labour Conservative trading blows, but the latest poll, which is Survation for the Mirror, that's just appeared today, conducted 8th and 9th of December, so probably taking into account some of the latest news in terms of Christmas parties and whatnot in Downing Street. That gives Labour a 6% lead. Conservatives are down to 34%, Labour on 40%. So clearly Labour are beginning to get back into a position where you would expect an opposition to be in, actually mid-term. You expect opposition to be leading the opinion polls at this point. Generally, not always, but most of the time, the opposition will be in the lead sort of mid-term. So we may be starting to see a reversion back to a more typical type setup, to be honest. So what's going to be interesting to see how big the Labour lead gets. At this point, I don't think the Conservatives will be too worried. That's kind of manageable. 6% lead, 4%, 5%, 6% lead to the opposition mid-term. I don't think the Conservatives will be too worried about that. If the lead starts going into double digits, then I would think the Conservatives will start getting a little bit jittery, and if it goes into a teens lead, say 15% lead for Labour, then I think the Conservatives would start to panic. If the Labour got to 20-30%, then you are getting into territory where even if there is a swing back to the government in the final year of the Parliament before the election, it won't be enough to prevent the opposition from winning. So it depends how big the Labour lead gets, but clearly there has been a significant shift during November after all of the various things that have gone on. I won't go through the list because we all know what's happened over the past few weeks, but there have been several things that have cropped up for the government, and particularly for Boris Johnson in particular, that has started to see the swing to the opposition beginning to take place there. This is how the overall voting intention graph is looking. So crossover between Labour and the Conservatives has taken place. This takes us back to the beginning of the Parliament back in December 2019, when, of course, the Conservatives have a big lead over Labour after winning the election with a near landslide majority. The lead increases through the first months of 2020. Then there's a narrowing. This time last year, interestingly, there was a narrowing and nearly a crossover. Didn't quite crossover. There's nearly a crossover between Labour and the Conservatives at the end of 2020. And then a widening again through the early part of 2021. The Conservatives go back into the lead. Labour sort of falls away. That's the vaccine rollout gathers pace. But the polls have actually been narrowing through the summer. So you remember when we started these videos back, I think the first we did was in June, and then the predicted Conservative majority was sort of around 60 seats, not all that far from where they are right now. And ever since our first video, actually, the polls have been gradually, or the lead from Labour to Conservative, gradually been narrowing. So that now we have actually seen crossover occurring between Labour and the Conservatives. So now on the graph, Labour is in the lead, actually, over the Conservatives. And again, what's going to be interesting is to see how far into the lead Labour goes over the next few months. Will we see Labour sort of taking off and doing something like that? Will we see them, just a little bit in the lead? Will we see the Conservatives really falling like that? Will we see the Conservatives flatline like that? So it will be very interesting to see what goes on. Down on the bottom, we've got the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, SNP and Reform. They're not really moving a great deal, to be honest. The movement looks like it's particularly between the Conservatives and between Labour. In terms of overall approval, Boris Johnson is becoming very, very unpopular at the moment. It's a sea of red. This is showing all of the approval rating for Boris Johnson going back to the beginning of the autumn. So this is how he has developed through this autumn, starting with this first poll, which is Opinium, from the 2nd and 3rd of September, and finishing with this YouGov poll, which is the 22nd of November. And we see that he's gradually getting more negative, but the negativity of his personal ratings. And there are various ways you can ask this question. So approve, disapprove, favourable, unfavourable, good, bad, well, badly. Various ways you can answer. You can ask the question. But we see as we go up the table that his net approval rating gets increasingly negative until we get to this YouGov poll, the 22nd of November, where it's down to minus 35% approval, 29% approving, 64% disapproving of Boris Johnson at that point. And of course, that is some way short of like the current crises that are going on. So I would imagine, I don't know, we'll look at this again in January for December's poll, but I would imagine when we get into December, when we get into January, look at this again, I would imagine that we will see the net approval going even more negative potentially for Boris Johnson. At the same time, Keir Starmer is not setting the world alight in terms of his popularity. He is still generally net unpopular, just a little bit less so compared to Boris Johnson. So take the final. So you see again, but Keir Starmer is something seen regularly with him right from the start to the finish of this. He is in a sea of red, so he is not a popular leader of the opposition whatsoever. He may become so, but up to this point, up to the 22nd of November, as far as we get to, he is not a popular leader of the opposition. But what we can say is that he's a little bit less unpopular now, if you like, compared to Boris Johnson. And the final poll is a good example of that. So, for example, got 22nd of November, YouGov asking well, badly. So, 23% approving of Keir Starmer, 57% disapproving of him. That gives him a net approval rating of minus 34, which is pretty atrocious for a leader other than opposition. Remember, he's not done anything to upset him because he's not in power. He's just, leader of the opposition. And so he should be attracting, all of the people who are fed up with government, Boris Johnson. He should be attracting them to him. And he's not really. He's at minus 34. But that's just not quite as negative as Boris Johnson, who's at minus 35. And actually, 29% approve of Boris, but 64% disapprove of him. So you can see what's going on. They're both very unpopular, but overall Boris is probably now more unpopular than Keir Starmer, although neither of them are particularly setting the world alight, has to be said. That may change for Keir Starmer, though, during December. I have seen a little bit of recent data, and it's not on this page yet, but I have seen a little bit of recent data sort of suggesting that Keir Starmer might be getting a little bit more popular. So we'll see when we look at this again in January. In terms of the government overall, finally, the government is continuing to become more unpopular. This is the government popularity or unpopularity tracker from YouGov, and there we see at the moment 54% are disapproving of the government to 24% that are approving of the government. And, this is getting into quite a bad situation now for the government. The government did become very unpopular again at the end of 2020, just there around autumn to early winter 2020-2021. So it's kind of on a par, that maybe a little bit more unpopular than it was then, as the people who approved of the government back in at the end of 2020 was greater than the people that are approving of the government now. So I think actually net the government is more unpopular now than it was than it was back at the end of 2020. Not yet reaching this sort of level, which is where the government approval was, when Boris Johnson took over and Theresa May left office, where 70% disapproved of the government and only 10% approved of the government. That's a terrible situation. And if the government does become that unpopular, then I would suspect that Boris Johnson will be in serious trouble. At the moment, it's not as bad as that, but the government has become very unpopular during the course of this autumn. Governments generally are quite unpopular. So again, the measure is how unpopular does the government get? Political parties are generally quite unpopular. So the question will be, how unpopular do the Conservative Party get? Politicians and leaders are generally unpopular. So the question will be, how unpopular does Boris Johnson get? But you can clearly see that the government is in quite a serious position of unpopularity. And again, that doesn't take into account like the current situation with the Christmas parties and whatnot. And all of that. So we should wait and see how that develops, of course, over the coming month or so. Right, so that's brought you up to date with everything. There we go, webcam's back on. That's brought you up to date with everything. I'm so sorry about we missed last month's video, but the real movement, so that would have taken into account, and I did show them October's polls. I doubt there would have been that much change actually to the predicted Conservative majority. It would have been somewhere between around 10 and 20%, I think, if we'd done a video last month. The real movement has happened during November, from Conservative to Labour. So we brought you up to date with all of that, and we shall see now how things go during this month. I would assume the Labour lead is going to get bigger, and Boris Johnson's personal ratings will go ever further south, and the government will get even more unpopular. I would think that's the way things are going to go during December, with all of the current palaver that's going on at the moment about Christmas parties and so on. But we shall see, and we'll bring you up to date with all of it in January, of course. Right, so that's it. What do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments, please. And so for this one, that's all for now, though. And thank you so much for watching. We'll do our next video, charting the coming election and opinion polls and whatnot in January, first month of 2022. This one, though, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.